All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Commissioner Denner, will you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First item on the agenda is to approve our agenda.
Move. Second.
Motion by Weiss, second by Denner. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next up, Scott Mines, Emergency Management Director of Listener, to award a presentation for a citizen.
Good morning,
Scott.
thank you. As most of you know, a year and a half ago, we created a little awards program for the county, and this is actually our first use of it, and we get to award it to a generous citizen of the county, and I'm going to turn it over to Sheriff Lunsman.
All right, I'll just give you a background on what happened and let you know why we had got this award for him. On 5/29/24 at approximately 5:55 p.m., a Brown County deputy conducted a traffic stop on a reckless driver near the intersection of 132nd and 391st Avenue. The driver of the vehicle was immediately belligerent with the deputy. The driver was asked to exit the vehicle, and the deputy attempted to place handcuffs on the driver. The driver became non-compliant, and a physical altercation ensued between the driver and the deputy. Joel Sarda was driving by the scene during the altercation. Without hesitation, Joel stopped his vehicle and assisted the deputy with gaining control of the driver and placing the handcuffs on the driver. Due to Joel's swift and selfless actions, he was subdued without injury to the deputy, Joel, or the driver. Joel put himself at risk in an unknown situation and demonstrated his selflessness, strong moral character, and dedication to this community. Thank you, Joel.
Smile pretty, look at the camera.
I know, it keeps doing that, I don't know why.
Yeah, he's our technology guy.
All right.
On behalf of Brown County, we want to thank you, Joel, for your service. It's very, very well deserving, so thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That's what we got, thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Good job. All right, next we will open the meeting for any public comment. Does anyone wish to address the commission this morning on any issue or topic that isn't on the agenda? In person, out there online, or on the phone? Seeing none, we will move on. Next up, Marla Keyes, Executive Director for the Area 4 Senior Nutrition, with a program update and the 2025 budget request. Good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Good, how are you?
As you stated, I am Marla Keyes. Usually quite organized, but look at me go now. There it goes. I'll hand these out to all of you. It tells you a little bit about our program, but it also shows you our territory. I'm the Executive Director of Area 4 Senior Nutrition. We are a nonprofit 501c3 established in July of '73, so we've been around for over 50 years. We do serve the northeast corner of South Dakota, and have grown over the years to be as large as we are. Most recently took on Sully and Hughes County with us. We do have 22 sites, from New Effington down to Webster, Fort Pierre, over to Mobridge, and up along the North Dakota border. So we operate on about a $3.2 million budget, funded 40% by contract with Department of Human Services. So 60% of our operating needs are required to be met by donation, county supports, things like that. We also apply for other random grants or assistance through other grant programs that are out there. So we do what we can to meet that budget every year, and we operate, this is my first full year, been very successful this first full year in operating a very healthy and strong budget. We served about 255,000 people so far this year, and our fiscal year ends June 30th. So we're guessing we'll be around 270. Our goal was 265. So we are seeing growth. Last year was 245,000. So there is, the aging population is increasing. Obviously, when I say aging, you do have to be 60 to qualify for our program. There is not an income limit. And the grant that we get that supports 40% of our operating needs does not allow us to charge for meals. And we do have to follow their stipulations as far as the dietitian guided menu from myplate.org. We follow quite a few other standards and provisions in our contract with them. And I report to them monthly. We have a very close relationship with them, but it is important that we follow those stipulations, because without that strong 40%, we don't have a foundation to even stand on. So we've received support from the county in the past and have been very grateful. However, our need continues to rise, as is everyone's, I'm sure. So I just thought being present and then knowing Lynn, it was nice that you welcomed me to be able to present some facts in person. I stated that we have a suggested donation of $5 a meal. So you're going to hear me talk about our meal per, or cost received per meal, because we cannot charge. So if someone says that they cannot charge, or they say they can only pay $1, we will accept $1. We don't turn anyone away. Aberdeen, Hecla, and Groton are sites in your county that we are currently operating. Aberdeen is serving on average 5,300 meals a month. 2,500 of them are home delivered. We do have, the program does have stipulations for being home delivered. However, the state tells us not to tell people no if they won't. So that number increased highly with COVID. And people got comfortable staying at home, unfortunately. We've tried to ask people to get back out, because obviously our mission is served by people socializing, hearing what's going on in other people's churches, accessing their communities. We want them using the road, stopping at the pharmacy on their way, maybe picking up some groceries then on their way home, things like that, because that mental health is just as important as their physical health and the nutritious meal. But right now we are serving, it's darn near 50% home delivered, and that's pretty costly. Our cost per meal, or our receipt per meal, is $4.73 in Brown County. Pretty nice, in Aberdeen, pretty strong in Aberdeen. That does fluctuate a little bit, but never does go below $4. Hecla, we served 325 last month. And most of them are congregate or pickup. We don't have any home deliveries in that area. Finding volunteers in a smaller community is even harder to do. So we do have to ask people to come in and pick up. Otherwise, the supervisor up there delivers to their homes at the end of serving the meal. She has done that on occasion if people didn't feel up to coming. And usually we commonly receive $4.29 a meal. The kick in the gut here is Groton. We serve about $800 meals a month in Groton. 35 of them on average go down to Condie. And we do have a driver who takes the community bus down and back that delivers those meals once a week. However, 600 of those 800 meals a month are home delivered in Groton. And we receive on average $1.06 a meal. It's a very, very low income area. In fact, it's comparable to our Mobridge and Pierre areas, which are our reservation areas. We cannot seem to get a thumb on why so low, but that is extremely costly. Right now, our relationship with the person who provides the meal in Groton is a subcontract. We don't own the kitchen. We contract with Red Horse, and so we are having to provide a supplemental fee, a contract fee to him, to offset some of those to-go container costs and the labor of, because again, finding volunteers. We have recruited with some of the churches, and then of course there's Dakota Bank there, and we've recruited with Dakota Bank, and they have those obligations federally to volunteer at places, which is helpful, but that's usually 1 or 2 times a month, and we have a 5-day-a-week service. So often the owners of Red Horse are delivering the food themselves, and then that takes them out of their kitchen and limiting how fast they can serve their own people who are patronizing their restaurant for lunch. So, it's pretty tough out there. I think probably our biggest challenge is that we are paying staff because we cannot find volunteers, and that's it. That's in our whole territory. We're paying staff to do routes, to deliver food, versus having volunteers do it. And the few that we have, we're very grateful for, but most of our volunteers are over 60 because they're not working anymore and able to do that. We do have some community resources, some banks, the Realtors Association, things like that that do offer to volunteer to help, but we're having to pay staff and then of course pay them mileage, and so that cuts into the profit that we might make, that $4.73 in the Aberdeen area anyway.
Question for you.
Sure.
Do you generally see a lower contribution rate on the home deliveries than the people who would come to the senior center, like in Aberdeen, for example?
No, that is not something that we have tracked, but that's a very good question.
I just wondering, when you say Groton being, a majority home delivery
No.
and also lower contribution.
Yeah, no, it just happens to be.
Okay.
In some of our, I can't say, that is the case in Groton, but that is not the case in Mobridge or in Fort Pierre.
Okay.
And Fort Pierre right now has like an 86-cent average that we're getting for a meal, and Mobridge is closer to $2, but just as many people that are coming in to eat as we're home delivering are not paying in those areas, so. Our average cost that we have per meal is $2.81, so I think we're doing a great job of providing a well-balanced meal. I pushed that pretty hard my first year with the company because food costs are so out of control. We also were able to reestablish our relationship with a dietitian on a little bit closer of a basis. I wanted to get some help. I mentioned earlier that we do have a contract with the Fox County Jail, which is a for-profit portion of our business, but it does help supplement what we're doing on a regular basis. But anyway, we also have to have those meals because they have federal prisoners. The marshals require that we have a dietitian approving our menu, and so we wanted to increase our relationship. So we were looking for resources and help, so we're constantly shopping Cashway, U.S. Foods. Put your pencil to the paper. We need, a little better numbers. Is there a rebate system? Any kickback or anything we can do to reduce our food costs. So I've been constantly working with the folks. And of course, we all know that it would be nice if people would just volunteer to bring in a tray of cookies, things like that. But being state funded, they turn their nose up as a restaurant owner. You can't just allow food to come in off the street and then serve it under your name. So it would be nice to be able to accept all of those tomatoes when, the time of year comes. Or, oh, I have squash, you could just make squash pie instead of pumpkin pie. Well, that'd be really nice if the state didn't mandate what we serve. So we are having to, really watch those food costs regularly, but with delivery containers and the cost of delivery, that does take us over $3 a meal often. So what a patron is willing to pay, we're almost immediately out, and we haven't paid for rent, electricity, insurance for our staff, insurance for our equipment and new equipment, things like that. So operational needs are definitely important for us. We are asking the county to consider $8,000 to $10,000 next year, just because of my comfort in the company and knowing what other counties that are much smaller than Brown County and the number of people served are giving to us on a regular basis. I felt it only fair that I come in and share those numbers with you and share that we have probably 4 or 5 counties who are giving as much as you gave in the past few years, if not more. And so we are asking for an increase, and I just wanted to give you those raw numbers so you could hear we are out there pounding the pavement and doing what we can to deliver every day, and we're meeting the same challenges that other small businesses are. Sure. With food costs and insurance costs on the rise and things like that. So we would appreciate your consideration and your support in the 2025 budget.
Good.
All right. We are just starting our budget hearing process, so you're one of the first to present, so we will be working on this over the next several weeks. And
okay. I sent a letter in. Are you interested at all in having me email any figures that I spoke about today? Anything?
I
No?
think this is sufficient for me.
Sufficient?
You got enough to do.
I get a lot of windshield time.
No, we understand, and it's a very good recap and update on
the whole process and some of the challenges that you face as well, so we appreciate that.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Marla.
Thanks for being here.
All right, next up, first reading of the following ordinances. Lynn?
Ordinance 271, an ordinance amending Title IV, second revision, Brown County ordinances as amended to rezone certain described properties. Filed by Morgan and Jackie Stebbins to go from agricultural preservation district to mini ag district.
All right, is there anyone here to speak to ordinance 271? Not, this is first reading, entertain a motion to approve.
Move.
Motion by Weiss,
Second.
second by Gage, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, motion carries.
Ordinance 272, an ordinance amending Title IV, second revision, Brown County ordinances as amended to rezone certain described property filed by Julie Lillis to go from ag preservation district to mini ag district.
All right, is there anyone here to speak to ordinance 272? Seeing none, entertain a motion to approve.
Move. Second.
Motion by Feldheim, second by Weiss. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next up, approve and authorize chairman to sign the 2024-2025 Roberts County Jail contract at $115 a night. Move. Motion by Weiss.
Second.
Second by Feldheim. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next up, approve a resolution to create a county road and bridge levy. That was in the packet, if you read it. It is a new levy that we've never had on before, and the whole purpose is to come up with some additional road and bridge dollars that are desperately needing. We'll be hearing that budget, I believe, next week, but the numbers continue to grow like every other part of the budget, but that is taking a significant increase because of the cost, all the associated costs, so we think this is a way of at least addressing part of that. Dirk, do you have any comments you'd like to make on this?
Yeah, just a second.
Time's up.
Yeah, I guess, like I stated previously, or a little bit last week, and I'm not gonna comment on your previous budget request. But, I was a little bit aggressive, like I said last week, a little bit with throwing some numbers in there, and actually, it was about 10% of the system, that was gonna get touched in some fashion. Well, that was about 15 million, as I told you, and, I also been around long enough, I know what happens with the money, and like I said last week, this feels a lot like, the way things were, prior to COVID and prior to getting, our free, interest-inducing money. So, I'm stumbling a little bit here because I know that not everybody's gonna agree with this, and I understand that, and I understand the environment we're in and all that, but it's kinda to the point, I cut the people down as far as we can go, in my opinion, unless the public wants to switch to a 2-day snow removal, then we could cut the people some more, but as you guys know, cutting people really doesn't save that much money when you're looking for millions and millions, so I don't wanna forecast woe and gloom, it's not like if we can't fund the budget, the next day everything's gonna go to hell, but we're gonna lose ground a lot quicker than we're losing it now, and, my biggest frustration is some of the good things that we've done. It's gonna be real hard to watch them go bad, I don't mind if the bad stuff gets worse, but we've made some pretty significant investments in the last 10 years, and I think that's just gonna be really hard to sustain that. So I don't know exactly how to approach this. I'm not real good at selling stuff. I like to just tell you how much money I want, and you guys give me what you can, and we go do good stuff with it. And regardless of how this ends, we're gonna do good stuff either way. It's just how much do you want? And the other part of it is the things we'll be doing won't be near as sustainable. It's kinda like owning a used car that you gotta do a little tune-up on more frequently. But if that's all you can afford is a used car and you can afford to maintain it over 5 to 10 years, well, that's where you end up. So that's kind of the trade there. I think the things we wouldn't be near so sustainable. And, I mean, the reality is you'd have to close the entire courthouse in order to make up for the difference here. So, I wouldn't change how I really approach things too much. I wouldn't get wildly, start doing crazy stuff like gold-plated roundabouts and whatnot. But, I think just to even try to stay the course a little bit, we're gonna have to come up with something to offset the cost. And I know everybody listening and everybody in that room and everybody with their budgets, I get it, you know, we're all in the same boat here. And I also know that the commission, it's a lot easier to not buy a pile of gravel than it is to lay somebody off. So I get all of it, and I don't know how inspirational this talk is. But I'd be happy to answer any questions if you would like something more directed than me just rambling.
All right, thank you, Dirk. I know in the years that I've been a commissioner, and I know Commissioner Weiss has been here longer than me, but I think the commission in general has done a good job of doing our best to keep taxes low. We understand that property taxes are basically our only source of revenue for the most part, and I feel we've done as good a job as we possibly could to keep those as low as possible. But there comes a time when the need just continues to grow, and we've reached that point with the highway budget, and we've got the luxury of having a large geographical county, probably the biggest county in East River, South Dakota, with a lot of miles of roads, a lot of asphalt, a lot of gravel, a lot of bridges. So everything about our county just compounds the problem with what we're faced to upkeep, and you know, the highways are important to all of us for a lot of different reasons. So I think this is kind of an attempt to address the issues in probably the least painful way that we can, to ensure that, like Dirk said, the progress that we've made, we're able to maintain that, and going forward, continue to make improvements and keep what we have in the shape it's in. Other comments regarding the levy?
Well, you know my propensity for rambling since I've been here that long. 30 years ago, when the cap was put on for property taxes, and there was severe issues about the way we were funding local governments with property taxes, a variety of things happened. The personal property tax replacement money that counties received as a result, previous to that, of a tax system that was eliminated, was taken away from counties, and subsequently, about 8 years later, there was an increase that the state granted for license plate fees, that the county did receive some additional funds, and I had noted several times, and will continue to since then, that basically the additional funds that the county did receive as a result of that basically barely replaced the personal property tax replacement money that the state had promised us and then reneged on back then, so it really wasn't a net gain. And then since then, the state's allowed for a wheel tax, which I was pleased that we cautiously instituted a number of years ago, and the citizens allowed us to do that without referring it or eliminating it. And it's a small, but it's a significant, important contribution to the funding that we have for our highway projects, and we share that with the townships, portion of that revenue going on as we go. And I don't hesitate to point out that the tax system, the way that it's set up, counties are relied primarily on property taxes, and with the cap, statutorily, there's the space in our mill levy, but that cap limits that basically to where we were at the time when it was instituted, and Brown County, like several others, was technically artificially low in where we were at that time, so there was no consideration for making adjustments to where you probably could or should have been, given the flexibility and the responsibility that we have to our local constituents when we make those decisions. Given the number of the miles of road, the number of bridges that we have, and the responsibility, and rightly so, the way that we cooperate with the townships in our geographical situation with the drainage and things like that, I think is an appropriate way to do that. And quite frankly, you know, any outside analysis of how much we should be budgeting for our highway department in order to be able to maintain it appropriately, we're woefully short where we need to be. So we need to try and augment that when we can, if at all possible. The fact that the state and the cities, to a certain extent, and it's not to be critical, but that's the nature of the beast, rely heavily on sales tax, allows for most generally an increase in revenue without having to increase the tax by virtue of two things. Number one, additional economic activity means that there's more things going on. So you have the same tax levy, you generate more revenue because things continue to increase. You have more people, you have more activity. The other component of that is it has a tendency to follow inflation. When they instituted the cap 30 years ago, they picked 3% or a CPI, and there's a variety of CPIs out there, or 3%, whichever one is less. Well, if you're pushing around 2 to 2.5%, 3%, maybe 3.2%, you're not staying too far behind with that. Well, in the last couple, 3 years, when we've been experiencing, depending on which index you want to use, anywhere from 9 to 30%, we can't keep up with that. And so we're left with trying to make decisions about what are we not going to do, and we've been doing that for an awful long time, or what other options do we have. And this is a funding opportunity that's been out there that we haven't chose to exercise, and frankly, don't want to if we don't have to. But I feel, especially, with my years of experience, it's important for us to take this to heart at this point in time, and with the increases that are in the marketplace, we need, this additional revenue in order to keep up. And so, reluctantly, I'm going to move that we put it out there.
Okay.
Not reluctantly, but, I'd like to not have to do that, but I'm going to move it.
Okay,
That's it.
Commissioner Gage.
Just a couple things to reiterate. I think that the levy, so everybody knows that money is gonna have to go to it's required through the levy that it goes for road and bridge work. It's not like this is just an increase in general fund dollars. The other thing I just wanted to touch on is what Dirk had said there, and just slightly more into that his original budget, what came in at 15 million, was to touch 10% of the asphalt roads over, so you're touching every road over a 10-year period. Going down to the 13 roughly million that he's asking for, and using this to try to make up that difference, we're still not getting to those roads every 10 years. I mean, that's pushed out, we'll ballpark 13 to 15 unless Dirk is, so even just a maintenance program to keep the roads in shape, I mean, gets harder and harder, and then they tend to fall further and further behind, not due to any fault of the highway department or anything, but just budgetary constraints, and that's just looking at what the prices are now. And, over the last couple of years, how much they have increased. So this is just trying to fill the gap of where we are to where we're trying to get to be able to keep the roads in decent shape and to continue on. So I'll second.
Okay.
Is that a resolution that should be read, or do we just do the resolution without reading it, or?
I can sure read it if you'd like. We have it here.
I think for clarification, I think it would be best to
Well,
let
that's
it
a good
read.
point. It is an actual printed resolution, so thank you for that.
All right, resolution number 31-24, resolution to create a county road and bridge levy. The governing body of Brown County, South Dakota desires to properly maintain, repair, construct, and reconstruct and improve roads and bridges in Brown County in order to benefit and preserve the welfare of Brown County residents and taxpayers in the long term. Law now permits the governing body of said entity to establish a tax amount which may be levied, and such amount can increase each year with the amount of inflation and new construction. All property within the county must pay the road and bridge levy. However, 25% of the taxes generated by the property within a city will be remitted back to that city for their own bridge and street purposes. Therefore, the board does now establish a base property tax in the amount of $3,251,809.19, which is 60 cents per thousand in assessment. Starting with the calendar year 2024, taxes payable in the calendar year 2025. This action has been taken by the board and approved by at least 2/3 vote of the board. This decision may be referred to a vote of the people upon a petition signed by at least 5% of the registered voters in the district and filed with the governing body within 20 days of the first publication of this decision. Unless this action is referred to a vote of the people and reversed by such vote, this resolution authorizes the county auditor to spread a levy to raise tax dollars in the above stated amount, allowing for a percentage increase from inflation and new construction in subsequent years. Dated this 18th day of June, 2024. Are there any questions? We have a motion by Weist and a second by Gage to approve this road and bridge levy. Tyler?
Is there a way that you guys could ease into it a little bit, maybe consider something, a smaller number, and maybe for a time, and then reevaluate later on?
I guess anything is possible, but when I listened to the numbers that we were just presented, and as Commissioner Weist stated, the actual numbers that's needed is considerably more than what our budget, and it always has been for the 16 years I've been here. I know in the past, we've hovered around that $10 million mark a year, and in actuality, that number should have been a minimum of about 20 million for us to do what statutorily we're required to do and to keep our citizens safe. So, yeah, it is a possibility, but I guess I feel that it's critical that we come up with additional revenue, and this is the best way to do it that's the least painful for everybody,
And then,
in my opinion.
yeah, Mike mentioned like the wheel tax, is that limited by the state, or is that a county?
That's per wheel.
Can they increase those kinds of?
No, they're graduated, but we went to the max. And it's not overbearing, but it has a limitation on the number of wheels, and that's, like I said, we share that, same as this would be shared with the city to a certain extent, with some of that. And unfortunately, you know, and that's part of the reason, same thing when it comes to wages and, you know, water, wastewater rates, same thing with, you know, we're involved with the landfill for a fee that we put on, and we use that other separate fee to maintain the dumpster sites, which I think is a good thing going on, and your point's well taken, and this is something that we've held off with doing, but unfortunately, when you make the decision, you need to graduate it in there, but you kind of have to pull the Band-Aid off. And then the nice thing about this is that, you know, once it is instituted, assuming that it is, then it does have an inflationary push that tries to keep up with it. And then it's kind of like what I said with the sales tax, you know, that's built in automatically, that kind of does that because of the, you know, the inflation that goes with it, as well as the extra economic activity.
I know you guys
When you get a set fee, you don't.
I know you guys have been fighting this forever, but it'd be nice to, you know, hopefully see some turn in the legislature and give another chance to them to do something, but.
I agree, my head hurts from trying that for 30 years.
Yeah, it falls on deaf ears during the legislative session, for sure.
If passed, does that have to be acted on each year? Like townships have to act on theirs each year at their general meeting. If the county puts this in force, is that just an ongoing, or do they have to act on that every year?
No, it's a one-time deal.
The way I read it and the way I understand it, it's automatic, yes. Any other comments, questions?
It's structured similar to some of the additional levies that the schools have had the opportunity to use over the years.
So 60 cents the maximum we can do.
Okay,
That's what, I thought you said that before.
right.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts, I guess, on all this. I mean, probably one of the last things I want to do as a commissioner is raise property taxes. But we also have, probably two of the things I hear the most of, and probably the same for all of you, is my roads need to be fixed and my taxes are too high. And I talked to several people just in the community about this, and I said the same thing to him, and he said, well, it's either option A or B. And so I guess here we are sitting at the table talking about option A or B. Do we want, to raise taxes and fix roads, or raise taxes or fix roads? I mean, so the roads do need it. I mean, driving around, there's some success stories, like I was driving up towards McPherson County on County 5 here over the weekend, and that road looks great, but obviously that's a brand new road too. There's a lot of roads that need some attention. A lot of guys that have been coming in for 10 years asking for their road to be paved or fixed, and we're finally starting to get to it now down in the Brown County 21 area. Be a good example of that. Going back to what Kyler said about the sales tax, I do think there is some more awareness in the legislature. Now, we obviously still haven't passed anything, but I think the awareness is growing. There's been a lot of education happening. Like, the first time, like when I was brand new in the legislature, in this same sales tax, I think Lee Gable had brought up his proposal. The first time that came up, I actually voted against it, just, no new taxes, just kind of that idea. And then the second time, had a little more opportunity to visit, with others and with Commissioner Gable and other people in Pierre, and I ended up voting for it. And then after that point, I voted for those types of proposals, moving forward. And I think the same could be said for some other legislators that are learning about the need and the fact that we do go closer to a crisis every year. Maybe not Brown County, but somewhere else. We're probably going to see a county struggle or potentially even go belly up at some point, which is concerning. So I do think at some point the legislature will probably allocate some sales tax dollars. I don't know if that's in 1 year, 3 years, or 30 years, or 15 years. I don't know. I do think it'll happen. I just don't know when.
Should we start a pool?
Yeah, we can start a pool.
Over under, 30 years, maybe.
Over under.
I do think it'll happen. I don't know how soon. I think that day is coming. Ideally, the 0.3% that they took off, by lowering the state sales tax from 4.5 to 4.2, which was sunsetted. When that sunset goes away, they're going to be debating this year whether or not they want to leave the tax at 4.2 permanently, or if it sunsets and goes back to 4.5. I think that 0.3% would be perfect to go to counties, and I think that would make a huge difference. So I'm probably being a little optimistic, thinking that we have a decent shot at those dollars, but I have to believe that we have a shot at the dollars, or at least a portion of them. So what I wouldn't mind seeing is if we go through with this today, I'd feel a lot more comfortable if we did put on like a 2 or 3 year sunset, where we have to reconsider this, hoping that the state does come through. Because in my perfect world, in 1 or 2 or 3 years, the state will come forward with some kind of sales tax dollars that will be equal to or more than the 3.2 that we're talking about today for the county, and maybe you can let this sunset if we can get additional dollars from the state. If not, you come back in 2-3 years and we do the same thing we're doing today, and you continue it on for an appointed period of time.
Would you consider supporting it instead of having a specific time frame on it, putting a trigger to say if at such time the state allocates sales tax revenue, that would reconsider it? Instead of saying in 2 years, at such point in time?
I think it helps.
I would be okay with that. The problem with the 2 years is 2 years comes around and they're not going to do anything in the meantime. And you know as well as I do,
In 2 years might be a little short. Even if you extended it to 3, you'd be giving.
But I prefer if there was an alternative revenue stream.
Yeah,
if that actually happens, whenever it is, if it happens next year, fine.
For sure,
I'm okay with that.
And for anyone listening, on the phone or later online, my preference, and I think your guys too, would be sales tax.
Yeah.
Not property.
Share in that.
Because I look at the property taxes. There's a lot of guys paying a lot of property tax, and the last thing I want to do is raise that, because I think property taxes, quite frankly, are too high the way it is. But we have roads to take care of.
Agreed.
So, in a perfect world, again, the sales tax would hit, we'd actually get a few of those dollars, which by default would have a better inflationary increase on average than, you know, the 3% at most that we'd get through property.
So I prefer that alternative revenue stream be the trigger as opposed to a date.
Yeah.
And I would agree with that.
If you're amenable to that.
Well, and I'm not opposed to it. I mean, I'd maybe take the date, you know, and even if we push it out, you know, a little farther, because if you went, just say 2 years, take 2 years off the table and went 3 or 4, you'd be giving this legislature and this governor a chance, and then you'd be giving the next legislature and the next governor a chance. So, you know, I mean, I would probably be more favorable towards if we said 3 or 4. I'm not opposed to the trigger, if it's automatic. I know the state did that in regards to online sales tax, and the trigger never fired after the after the online sale, after the Wayfair decision was made, and that was actually a fight that we had up there. So, in terms of the language of the trigger, if we could get it where it was, you know, very much an automatic trigger that took place, you know, immediately upon that, I mean, I would consider that. It would just need to be worded in a way that was automatic rather than we still have to vote, just so it's clear that once the sales tax dollars come in, or if or when they come in, then we see this property tax go down. Because I think in terms of being good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, this is a good use for it. I don't think there's too many people that would argue that point. But if we get additional sales tax dollars, I think the prudent thing would be to reduce that property tax back down for the taxpayers.
Go ahead.
If not for the cap, this wouldn't be necessary. The cap limits us to that one CPI index or 3%. Statutorily, we've got lots of room notwithstanding the cap. And previous to the cap being put in, along with the owner-occupied 20-30% and all the rest of those as part of that whole package, as well as the base for local school funding, which established, you know, basically what they were going to get based on their average daily attendance. And then they've, you know, unfortunately had to, and they still are having to either opt out or add additional levies and so forth to it. If not for that cap, we would, and historically up till that point, adjust our mill levy to generate the revenue that we would need, you know, not only on an ongoing basis for capital projects, whether it's for capital improvement or construction or new, you know, equipment acquisition, things like that. And that's part and parcel to us being so close to our constituents, is that we're responsible to them, making the case on an individual and a global basis to say, this is what we think is a priority, what we need to do that. And previous to the cap, we had the flexibility along with the responsibility to adjust that mill levy as we saw fit to accomplish those things. That's been taken away from us, and so that's what's forced us into having to have this conversation and take this consideration in the first place. Historically, before the cap, which is, you know, something we've all lived with now for, you know, I remember what happened before that, we had the flexibility along with that responsibility to say we're going to adjust the mill levy for these anomalies that are natural. You know, it's no different than anybody who's running a business or a farm operation or whatever it is. You've got certain capital improvement projects, you know, that you need to fund, or equipment acquisitions, or the rest of those kinds of things. What am I going to do, you know, for the revenue stream with that? Well, for us, it's taxes, and we had the flexibility to be able to adjust those mill levies. We can adjust it down, and then that readjusts our base, and we don't get it back. So, you know, unfortunately, we're not likely to do that. But when we need to increase them, even if it's for a short period of time, and then, you know, our own volition to bring them back, we don't have that flexibility anymore. So, you know, and then knowing, you know, just the practical part of it, you know, 2-3 years ago, I recall, you know, in committee hearings, that we had 3 or 4 different similar measures that would provide some funding relief to the counties. And it gets a little frantic, as you know better than I do during session, and you know, certain things that stick with you. And I remember the last of 4 bills in committee over the course of a couple weeks that were being considered, and one person who had consistently voted yes for the measures that failed out of committee, when the 4th one came up, they voted no, and simply made the comment, said, you know, I really think we need to be doing this, but I've heard it so many times, I'm just sick and tired of listening to it, I'm gonna vote no. And you're just like, what are we doing here? So I appreciate your optimism, and I'd like to think that's gonna happen, and I think you're right, we're getting closer. I don't think we're gonna get there in the next 2-3 years. I would be happily surprised if we did.
And Pierre operates on crisis mode, so more than likely, unfortunately, and I hate that this is probably the truth,
Yeah.
but if or when there's a crisis in one of our 66 counties, is maybe gonna be when the action happens,
Yeah.
whenever that takes place.
I want to say I appreciate the conversation and the exchange.
Well, not only the issue with the county doing this, you gotta throw in the other side of the entities doing it. The township, Westport Township has put their 50-cent levy on. Frederick School is now doing an opt-out, and now you're throwing the county road and bridge levy on. Just on a $500,000 property, you're raising somebody's taxes $800 a year. Now, that probably isn't bad for most people, but you have a lot of people on a fixed income that $800 in one crack on a $500,000 property or a $200,000 property. It's not just that we're trying to do this, you got all these other entities trying to get funds for this and funds for that, and there's a point in time that, when does it stop? I mean, and I'm not criticizing the fact that we need to do it for our roads, but it's just to the point that everybody else is doing the same thing too, going after those dollars and chasing them. And it gets difficult for the fixed income people.
Yep. Well, I too appreciate your optimism, Drew, and you and I were both there. We've lived it, and we've heard the arguments, and part of the problem, I feel, is every 2 years we get about 30% of our legislators that are new. So about the time we as a commission group get people up to speed and educated as far as the need and so on, every 2 years about a third of them are gone. So then you're re-educating the new people. And another problem that we're going to have to face and are already facing is, I look at Minnehaha County, and one of the arguments that we keep hearing is, if you need more revenue, you have the ability to opt out. Well, Brown County has tried that at least 4, if not 5 times, and it's failed miserably. Minnehaha, on the other flip side of that, they opt out all just willy-nilly as they see fit. Nobody refers it, because their tax base is spread over so many people. The increase in taxes is minimal. It's painless, or much less painful for them. And yeah, we could opt out, but I don't think it's anything that any of us want to try. You know, we're in a sense we're kind of opting out by passing this levy, but still, if the more South Dakota continues to change from rural to urban, the southeast corner of the state is going to become more powerful, have more representation in Pierre, and I think our chances of getting support for the rural counties is going to continue to diminish, because they're going to have that mentality, and I think it's going to get harder to get something passed than easier. But again, I appreciate your optimism. Sales tax is the obvious replacement or addition to needed revenue, but I don't see that happening anytime soon, unless there's a whole shift in philosophy under a new governor with a different vision and attitude towards no more or new taxes. Because you stated that's been part of the problem.
And the thing that's kind of got us is that 2/3 vote. I mean, it's very hard to achieve a 2/3 vote on anything with controversy. So I would agree it's going to be very difficult to get a 2/3 vote. Now, what I'm wondering is if that 4.5 would sunset back down to 4.2, that would maybe just take a majority vote, because if it's automatically going to 4.5 and they're just reallocating those dollars towards the counties, maybe that would just be a majority vote from what I'm recollecting. So that would give us at least a better shot.
Rather than 2/3, yeah.
Yeah, because I do think our chance of getting a majority vote are pretty good, pretty decent.
Better.
2/3, that's extremely difficult.
Right.
Anything with controversy is difficult.
How about a trigger that says that at such time as the state provides funding source that is equal to or more than the revenue generated by this levy, it would automatically be rescinded.
Yeah, I almost feel like we might need to take some time just to write it, because,
I understand?
you know, what if, you know, if the levy is 3.2 million, they come in with 2.9, it's like, what do you do then? You know, then the trigger does nothing.
Well, the other thing this also
Maybe you
allows
have a
us to
step.
do, you know, that would be an automatic trigger, but it
Mhm.
also allows the body, you know, at the time, to make that decision to say, okay, it's close enough, we're gonna rescind it anyway.
Could, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's not like it's built into the Constitution, you can't do anything with it without, you know, ratification and the rest of that stuff. I mean, it can be added or rescinded at any point in time, but, you know, to address your concerns, you know, with your fingers crossed, and hopefully, if the state would find, you know, in their benevolence with the, you know, the controversy with the prison and the possibility that, you know, regardless of how they define what food is, you know, has a potential of being eliminated altogether without any legislative action. So, I mean, things are just as uncertain as they always have been when it comes to predicting some of these kinds of things. But I'd be okay with an automatic trigger if that happened, and that would leave the door open if it was, you know, they actually did something like that and it was 10% less, you know, we'd turn around, you know, as a body and simply say, okay, that's getting us, you know, close enough to that revenue stream. We could do it on our own anyway.
So in the, one of the, and I talked to a good amount of people on this just over the last week. One of the concerns would be the 60 cents being the maximum, which I thought it was. I wanted to make sure before I said that, but maybe it looks just a little bit arbitrary if we just go straight for the max. You know, if we could do, say, like 30 cents, which would be half, that'd give us the opportunity in a few years, depending on what happens with legislature, to reduce it or increase it, depending on which way the winds are blowing, or, you know, inflation, if it kind of goes back down to more normal levels, we probably don't have a lot to worry about. But if it continues on with how it was through COVID, you're probably going to be increasing this again if we do sit at 30. So I think where I would be comfortable voting for this is if we would do 30 cents, and I'd be fine with your version of the trigger if we cut it down to 30. I think I can get to the point where I vote for it, because I am a little bit on the fence. At first, when we discussed this, I was probably thinking I was going to be a no vote, but also realizing that roads are one of the main things I hear about, and it's needed. So my preference would be to go to somewhere in the neighborhood of 30, and I'd be okay with your trigger if we went to 30.
Yeah, I mean, this is, go ahead.
Sorry, 30 puts us at like 1.6, with 25%, which is what? For that, you're looking at like shy of 1 million, roughly, to the county.
About it.
Roughly.
No, probably a little more than that, because it's only 25% within the jurisdiction. So like any land outside of a municipality goes 100% to the county. So at that point, you gotta.
So the problem you run into is if what was the budget, 11 million last year, I believe, roughly, to the highway. You're at 12 million this year if you increase it by the million there, and the request, I think, is 13 and a half, ballpark. I know you don't like ballpark, but ballpark is 13 and a half. So now you go from 15 to almost 20 years when you touch those roads. I mean, literally none of us will, well, I'm not saying none of us, but I mean,
we all use them more,
some
more than others.
I mean, you're gonna basically oversee a budget for a road once when you're on here. I mean, I don't know, to me going to, I think the 60 cents is because it's trying to get us on a plan that keeps the roads in decent shape, and that's what it's designed for. You know, I mean, at least gets us at 13 and a half. To be honest, I mean, when he I was out there a few weeks ago and he went over his plan for which fall into the 15.
Mm-hmm.
That was a great idea on trying to keep roads, at least the asphalt portion. I know the gravel too in there, but talking about just the asphalt, 10 years is a good amount to either maintenance and or major overhaul. I don't know if you're going back to 12. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna say it's better than nothing, but
yeah, well, with the
I prefer to get closer to the 13 if we can. I mean.
Hey, can I make a comment?
No.
Yes, go ahead.
It's
Scared him.
I'm cautious, I don't wanna wade into the debate too far, I just fix road stuff, or try to. But just a little perspective there, Drew, that road you're talking about west of Frederick
5.
was $3 million for that 8 miles, you know? And I think we did a couple miles going north up 6, that's in that contract. The other thing is, I can only think of 2-3 years where asphalt held the line on the cost. Now, I think our local guys are far enough ahead of the curve right now that we might not see as much of an increase going forward, or we may have reached a plateau. The other thing is, the asphalt line item, I'm guessing, is probably the largest expenditure the county makes in a single line item. I think it's like $6.5 million some years. And the inflation on that is outpacing everything, you know, except maybe some specialty steels and stuff. So it's been a little bonkers. Again, I'm back to where you guys gotta do what you gotta do, and I will understand whatever that is, but, and I'm not scoffing, Drew, I'm not scoffing at $1 million either, you know? But $1 million gets us like 4 miles of paving. If we're gonna farm it out, or, you know, would pay for maybe a third of that project we're gonna have up in the northeast part of the county. So, I'm just trying to add some perspective in there is all. And, you know, if asphalt goes up another 12% on a line item that you're planning to spend $5 million out of, it can slap you pretty good. That's all, carry on.
Thank you, Dirk. Commissioner Weiss.
And as I mentioned before, when we used to have the flexibility, it was before I even got here, to adjust the mill levy as necessary for the needs that you had in being responsible, I kind of see a parallel, you know, personally from my experience having been on the James River Water Development Board for the last dozen years. We partner with a lot of the smaller communities all the way up and down the Jim on a variety of flood control issues and you know, different kinds of things, but we also work with those communities on water and wastewater issues. And this is a reoccurring theme that Eric with NECOG will tell you that they participated in. You know, that, you know, they've had leadership and they're a smaller enterprise and stuff, and when it comes to water and wastewater, they haven't increased their local rates for 30 years in some cases. And finally, somebody, you know, wakes up one morning and says, we got more water leaking out of our water system than we've got patrons paying for it. We need to do something. And so they look to James River Water for a small contribution to help. They go to the state, the feds, and a whole variety of things. And what's your local contribution is an important thing that has to be reevaluated and readjusted. And if it hasn't been adjusted on an incremental basis to keep up, sometimes those rates are increased 2, 3, 4-fold. And it's all relative. And it's, you know, a shock to the budgeting, you know, that you become used to. But if you are going to, you know, kick the can down the road, and that's what we've been doing, and we're going to have to continue to do, but how far we're going to kick it, you know, is based on what we're going to be able to try and squeeze to put into that budget. We've got some significant needs in our highway system, and Dirk is right, and I do appreciate the fact that, you know, he lets us know what he should be getting or trying to get and so forth. But once the budget's set, he focuses strictly on saying, I'm going to get the most out of this budget, whatever I have to do, and balancing the same as, you know, a lot of the others. You know, here's what's, you know, on the road system, here's what's not on the road system that's eligible for federal help. Here's working with state DOT, they've got a big project, and they're going to utilize one of our roads as a detour, so they're going to be able to take a portion of that money to put some significant improvements into one of our sections of road that's on a timely basis that we're not going to have, that gives us some relief. So I think he does a very good job of juggling those kinds of things. But it's our responsibility to try and do what we can, as difficult as it is, to try and maintain a high enough level of funds available in order to be able to keep from falling too much farther behind. So appreciate the conversation. It's not an easy thing. I don't take it lightly.
One more quick thing. I know Dwayne touched on the opt-out options. I like this as a better approach going forward because it's it tells it where this money's going. Everybody knows where it's going and it has to go there. It doesn't just go into the general fund, so we, decide some other place to spend it. So people know that this is what we're gonna spend this on, increase this, the roads, are gonna try to help maintain, if not, hopefully improve where they're at, so.
I agree with that, because I talked to, one of the people I talked to who was for this, had said, as long as you can prove that it's just for the roads and bridges, I'm okay with it. And I said, yeah, that's what it does, and that was one of the people that ultimately said, yeah, go for it,
Lenny will make sure that happens.
Yeah, no, and I don't have any doubt there at all. Knowing the way that it's worded and what it is, that's not.
And even the city's portions from Aberdeen or Frederick or whatever, theirs has to go to roads and bridges also in there, so it is an increase for them and for that also.
And that's why I'm, kind of considering it. If it was just a general opt-out, I probably would be voting no, to be honest. But it is going specifically to the one thing that people ask for probably the most out of it. I assume you guys have the same conversations too, so. It is going to the greatest need. I don't know that now is a great time to increase the property taxes, but we do need to do something. And that's where if we could find some kind of a reasonable approach. I think the 30 cents makes a lot of sense because you can take one step up and then later on you have the flexibility to take another step or reduce depending on what the state does. You can go up or down rather than just going for the full 60 right off the bat. That would be my preference. But I don't know what your guys.
So let me ask the question, and not to complicate it, because I don't have a problem with the trigger, but just to keep it simple, and then like I mentioned, this body at any point in time can reconsider and take action on it. You okay with 30 cents, or with 30?
Yeah,
at this point?
Yeah, I'm much more comfortable with 30 than I am with 60. And part of, for what Doug said, just, this is not the only tax that's going up.
I agree.
Opted out, Groton's opted out, probably others too. 30 makes, I'm significantly more comfortable with 30 than I am 60.
The concern I have with going to 30 from 60 is, as Dirk said, the costs continue to rise. So if we raise it to 30 and we only take in $1.5 million, for example, instead of the $3.5 million, if we're only taking in $1.2 million, $1.3 million, so next year things go up again. Next year they go up again. So we've actually lost buying power, because if we could have gotten the 60, we'd have more money to spend to make the improvements at a lower price. But we're losing ground the longer we put things off, the more things are gonna go up, and we're actually losing our buying power by not having the money to be able to do things sooner than later, is my concern.
And I agree, and it wasn't intended as that, but it was the same point that I made, that when the personal property tax replacement money was taken away 30 years ago, and then roughly 10 years later, we got an increase in the license plate fees. It wasn't new money, it was replacing it, but we lost $5 million in between.
Yep.
That we could or should have had, so I think that's a point well taken. Just to acknowledge, Finance Director for the cities here, Mr. McQuillan, thanks for being here this morning. I assume this is why you're here for this discussion.
That's right.
I'm not gonna ask you to say anything, but if you'd like to, you're welcome to.
No comment.
No problem, but thank you for being here.
You bet, thank you.
Well, number one, if we went to 60 cents, it's not gonna fix Brown County's problem. Because if you went 30%, we're gonna get 7 miles of paved road, and we go to 2.4, we're gonna get 14 miles of paved road. Well, that's not gonna fix our problem 5 years from now, no matter what happens. And we still need more money than just that to even to maintain this road system in Brown County. Dirk said it yourself, what do we get, 6 miles versus 17 or 14 miles of pavement? It doesn't fix us. It sure helps, Dirk, but there's no way it's ever gonna be where we're gonna get over the top or ever get ahead of our road system at that dollar amount. It's a Band-Aid like always. That's what we get.
We gotta scratch our way closer somehow here.
And again, my concern is the longer we put it off, the more behind we get. I believe we have a motion and a second, if I remember right. I lost track of it.
I wanna get some additional funds, whatever, most people are comfortable with. I don't wanna do it at all, period, but we used to have the flexibility to take our responsibility, is, given to this position to do that. And I think it's really unfortunate that we don't have that flexibility now that's forced us into these kinds of things.
Taking away local control.
Exactly. Can we refer this to?
Some things never change.
Okay. I would be happy to change my motion to 30 if you're more comfortable with that.
Yeah, I could support 30, 60 I'm pretty uneasy,
I
but
understand.
30 I could support. I mean, I think it's it's proof to the taxpayers that it's a reasonable step up. It's not just the highest, which I do think looks just a little arbitrary if we go for the whole apple in one bite. If we take that one step up to 30, I'm more comfortable because I think I can explain it to people when they say, why did you raise my taxes?
And I can appreciate that, so.
Would there be an appetite to go to 50? I know I'm just muddying the water here, but we aren't going the maximum that's allowable, but we're compromising at 50 cents, which I think that's what the townships are allowed to do is 50 cents. So we're kind of right there with what the townships do. Still a little bit of an increase, but it's still not the maximum. Maybe I'm splitting hairs, but 50 would be a compromise that I could live with. I just feel the need to get as much revenue sooner than later to let Dirk do what he has to do.
Do you want to support or make a substitute motion?
Man, this is negotiation 101 here.
Absolutely. Hey, well, that's the process.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're supposed to be doing.
Welcome to appropriations.
Yeah, exactly.
I appreciate the fact that you dig into the details of these things, so I appreciate
I think
your
just,
perspective on
yeah, looking at the numbers, we'll negotiate more. I'll say maybe 40. That's still a round number. I'd probably be okay with 40. Anything more than that's kind of makes me uneasy.
I'm okay
Is
with
that a substitute motion?
Yeah, it can be. Yep.
Second.
Okay, we have a substitute motion.
Call the question.
For 40, we have a motion and a second, or is there any further discussion? Question's been called, and are we adding the sunset to go off nothing?
With
We're
that authority.
not dealing with that, okay?
That was my question. If we wanted to set a definite date for it to sunset, I'm comfortable scribbling that on a napkin. We can do it today. If you want to trigger, I want to be more careful with that wording.
Okay, it sounds like
I'm
that's
I
not...
mean, I'm good with the sunset, but I don't know that we have to. I mean,
Right.
again, I'm more comfortable at, I said originally 30, and now I say 40, then I was 60, and that's true. I mean, I'm good with the sunset, so, I mean, it's a...
I'm
deal.
okay without it, because we have that authority as a body, regardless of who's here.
A
at any point in time.
majority of the body can still come
Right.
back.
Okay, so your substitute motion does not include any kind of sunset. At 40 cents, and your second,
Yep,
is that, so
Yeah.
we know what we're voting on
Yep.
here?
we good?
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Is this a roll call vote? Roll call vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries, unanimous.
Good conversation.
Thank you
Tough
very much
subject.
for all your input, and, yeah.
Thank you for being here.
It is a good conversation, because we're dealing with probably two of the things that we all hear about the most, and that's taxes and roads. And
Yeah.
again, it's option A or B,
Yeah.
so.
So, once again, I appreciate the conversation.
Can't have one without the other, really, I mean.
That's right.
As I do too, thank you very much for throwing that around. That's, I don't know that we've had that spirit of a conversation on the local level, so thank you very much.
You bet. Thanks, Dirk.
Thanks,
for your
Dirk.
input. All right, next up, approve and authorize chairman to send the resolution to South Dakota Public Insurance Alliance. Board member, Commissioner Mike Weiss. It was in the packet. Is there any questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to that effect.
Move it.
Motion by Feldheim,
Since he has been real good at explaining what insurance is to us, I'll second that.
Is it is not?
Is it is not, so I'll second.
motion by Feldheim, second by Gage. Further discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Show me his abstain, please, thank you.
Okay, and I need a
Thank you.
5-minute break, or 2-minute break, before we move on.
Guess we talked too long.
That's all right.
No good conversation.
Yeah, it was. It is.
I think you got a little less chance of it being referred when people know you're not going for the max, that you're trying to do your due diligence of trying to.
Fair enough.
That's what I thought too.
We've got to do something, but, you know, this, what, little give or take 10%?
People understand, you know, inflation, because it's hit them.
Mhm.
You know, and if inflation has been bad, it has been on the roads too. I mean, the price of hot mix is just
Yeah, no, I don't like doing it either.
went crazy.
But you just reach a point. Thanks for your input as well.
My taxes, I just bought my house.
Mhm.
And then they reassessed it when I bought it, and then they increased it. So, I went from like $2,500 a year to $3,500 a year, or four. No.
Welcome to the game.
What does that change the total from 60 to 40?
I'll have to recalculate that one offhand.
Times .66.
Yeah, it should be. Divided by 3 times 2.
Mm-hmm. No, your road doesn't get asphalted.
No. If dirt was still out, I'd make a comment, but there's no sense in it.
Should be.
At least he's not throwing nails and stuff on it.
Yeah.
Left the light on, so I hope you were careful.
We're fine.
Yeah, we were.
2.16 million.
All right, moving on to the consent calendar.
Okay, approval of the general meeting minutes of June 11th.
Oh.
Motion by Weiss,
Second.
second by Dennert. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Claims and payroll.
Move. Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Weiss, second by
No,
Feldheim.
Feldheim first.
I'm sorry, motion by Feldheim, second by Weiss. We did pull one of the vouchers out, just so everyone's aware.
Okay.
We're including all but one of the vouchers. Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
HR report.
Move.
Motion by Weiss, second by Gage. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Lease agreement.
Move.
Motion by Dennert,
Second.
second by Weiss. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Travel request.
Move.
Motion by Weiss,
Second.
second by Gage. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Other business, there was an ECOG survey in there. I can fill it out if you'd like, or do we want to fill it out together?
Have at it.
Okay, I will get it filled out and returned. You don't need a motion to that effect either, or do you want a motion? Okay. All right, any other business to come before the Brown County Commission? We've had a request to go into executive session for personnel, contracts, and legal.
Yeah, Carly's on her way over.
Okay. Okay, entertain a motion to go into executive session. Move.
Second.
Motion by Gage, second by Dennert. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are in exec. All right, the light is back on. We're out of exec, back in session with no action as a result. We have budget hearings after we adjourn today, so is there anything else to come before the commission?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Motion by Weiss, second by Dennert to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are adjourned.